Hello, stream.
Hello.
um, we're here today to talk about transphobia, because of course. AP's
Oh,
Style Book, an organization that has liked to frame itself as an ally for the longest of time, um, through its short fucking time of fame, in a matter of years, has gone from "we care about the trans community" to "please don't call people turfs, it's offensive." And so from you know, I'd say they're like sellouts or traitors. I should have put betrayal in quotation marks because what they really are their fellow travelers, coattail riders. They rode on our struggles so they could get themselves big, and as soon as our support got them big, and a lot of, I mean, supporting the trans community normally gets a lot of feminist support because, well, misogyny is what puts down everyone in the trans community. Trans men uh, get put down as being merely women, and trans women, well, we're women that you can hit, girls you can hit. So, like, the whole framework of transphobia is centered around bigotry towards women, and so support of the trans community tends to get wide support from feminists. TERFs aren't feminists; they're fascists. So, like, them being against us does not counsel what I'm saying. Anyone can point out the fucking but the white feminists of the past. Feminism for the upper class is not feminism. So I do not think that the suffragettes are some example of feminism because they literally excluded poor women and black women from their movements. Like, yeah, they showed some examples of what happens when women struggle, and they're important to feminism for that. But one thing we can say about proletarian feminism is that it rolls up in contradiction to theirs. Unfortunately, first wave, second wave, and third wave feminism have all been a failure. That being um, proletarian, you have Marxist feminism, liberal feminism, and uh, neoliberal feminism, or third wave feminism, as people call it, which is actually more social fascist than anything. But um, the Marxist feminists were incredibly white supremacist for their time. Like, it wasn't really until the mid of the last century that started to change, and it, around that time, Euro communism ended up taking over, and Marxism got fucking absolutely crippled to the fucking floor in the areas where this form of feminism originated from, and it's more so proletarian feminism that carries the torch of this struggle because it's corrected and learnt itself. And within Maoist circles, you won't see people use first wave feminism as their framework; they'll use proletarian feminism. You then have second wave feminism, liberal feminism. They're the whatnots, like shrug your shoulder types. They think eventually everything will just peter out and get better. And then you have the third wave feminists, which are the radical feminists. Now, they did like originate from more principled people in the late 70s, early 80s as a sort of reaction to the liberalization of the first wave, and the second wave being a bunch of liberals. But that terminology was co opted in the 90s by different groups. Either way, point being, feminism is of mass support towards trans liberation predominantly. And so APsTylebook both rode the coattails of these two groups and took advantage of the struggles that bereft all of us. And then when they could find a group of women that were anti-trans and did not like being called TERF, so which you can find in so many groups of women, feminism itself being supportive of us doesn't mean every supporter of feminism is. Communism is supposed to be supportive of us, and I can find some supposed communists that are transphobic bigots. And so they took advantage of the fact that it's typically these privileged fuckers that tend to have the biggest problem with us, and fell in line with them. They fell in line with what makes them the most money, and that is supporting bigotry. And when it comes to supporting a small group like us, or a massive group, or at least what they perceive to be a massive group that they're going out to support of women, when actually it's more so TERFs are more of a minority amongst women, and actually have more support from Christian men that are into fascism and just fascists in general, that have this like we've hated these radical feminists for so much, but now they're against the transes. We're all supportive of them. Where Posey Parker couldn't get mass women support in Australia, but she could get white male, Nazi supremacists to come out in support of them. And no one can seem to give an actual answer as to why that happened. Although I bet that woman who was reading Mein Kampf in Scotland might have an idea.
Uh, yeah, I was just gonna read for those that have not seen it or seen the retweets or anything. Yeah, APStylebook on June 14th stated, on our updated transgender topical guide, Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, we recommend avoiding the vague and politicized term to describe cisgender women or others who object to the inclusion of transgender women in women's spaces. The actual still frame poster they put up, it basically states that you should avoid the vague and politicized term trans exclusionary radical feminist, or its acronym TERF, and gender critical to describe cisgender women or others who object to the inclusion of transgender women in women's spaces. Instead, be specific about a person's or group's objections and paraphrase quotations that use the term unless needed for a compelling reason. So, yeah, in
What do they
very
mean
blunt
by
terms,
What do they mean by cis women or people that exclude? It's not about cis women. It's about people that
yeah,
exclude. Men can be turfs. Like like being a cis woman doesn't make you a turf. That's such a turf thing to imply. It's someone that she needs to
yeah,
just attack women. Oh, and people that exclude trans people from women's spaces. It's like I wonder what's the most important point on that statement.
yeah, like this is in very blunt terms, it's basically saying it's like, for the sake of our profit and the sake of our viewership and everything like that, we are basically giving into the bigotry. We're giving into, to the people that have this problem with this specific term, and so we're telling you not to use it. Like, fuck off. This is like basically like the Karens getting mad at people for calling them Karens, because Karen is a derogatory term, and it's like no, fuck off, Karen. Like,
I mean, like it's also more so as well that um these people always had this bigoted position towards these groups because what basically is happening is we like the community, but now the transes are going too far. Even though, like, we're not going far enough. The system isn't solving shit for us, so yeah, we're getting more radical. What the fuck do you
yeah.
expect us to do? Sit on our hands, shit, and then clap?
I think one of the retweets that I put out was, I said, okay, let's go, then let's call them for what they truly are, then fascists. Let's call them,
Trans
trans exclude.
exterminatory racist fascists is what I call them.
I was gonna say, yeah, trans exclusionary reactionary fascist is the one that I typically use, and even though that's kind of redundant, but
Yeah,
it's one of
that's
those
why I
things.
thought when I used to call them radical fascists, and I was like, wait a minute, there's something better for this. And the reason why I went for racist is because white turf women that tend to dominate the scene always go on about
Yeah.
like Muslims and black people as these like evil people that we need to be careful of. The brutality of them, they're going to dominate women and cause us so much trouble.
Yeah, I just basically was just have gotten to the point where it's like I don't even like, if I just don't even like using the full trans exclusionary reactionary fascist. I don't even like using I don't even like using turf sometimes, because that it's just easier for me to just call them what they truly are, a fascist. And that it's like, if they don't want us using turf, okay, then it's like, fine, I'll step it up. I'll call you a fucking fascist straight to your face, because that is what you are.
It,
Feminism is not the exclusion of a certain section of the population. It is, it's either you believe in the empowerment of all women or you don't truly believe in feminism. And that's why these people that try to use feminism as like as a shield basically for their bigotry and their hatred, like, no, you don't get to co-opt that especially when you really consider the deep like roots of feminism, go back to the socialist movements, and even further back than that technically. So yeah.
Oh God.
So yeah, this APStylebook coming out and saying it's like, yeah, we don't believe in using this term. It's like, okay, then it's like great for completely outing yourself as supporters of these freaking bigots, these zealots, these absolute horrible excuses for human beings. Although at this point, if they're with fascists, I don't really consider to be human beings. They're tantamount to scum, and should be treated as such. And so I say, what wipe them off the face of the earth.
It's the shepherds I'm concerned with wiping out. And fascism, with the way it works, it's a very sheep and shepherd system. There are aristocrats whom are allowed to be in the know, and workers are abused to do their bidding. I see that it should be the ringleaders, the intellectuals, the leaders that get wiped out as people. But those whom are their followers, they need to be re-educated. The ones
Yeah.
whom are being lied to, being conned, being convinced, they need punishment if they've done crimes. But even the ones whom haven't are gonna need re-educating, because we can't just go for wanton murder in a place like that. Because if we look at it, like if we were to take that notion towards Germany, there would have been absolute massacre there. So many working class people and middle class people absolutely did support the Nazis. But yeah, it's it's your Hitlers, your Strassers, these types of people deserve nothing less than a bullet to the head or a rope around the neck if you want to be spicy about it, like the Russians were after the war. I'm not a big fan of lynching, kind of a bit crass in my opinion. The French invented the guillotine literally because it was crass. So like, I think we should, if you're gonna go the brutal way, use a fucking guillotine, or just use a bullet. But I agree with
I
Stalin, that killing people is just not the way to go about things. Stalin actually was on the side of the Soviets that banned the death penalty in the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, under popular demand, it was brought back.
Yeah, honestly, I'm all in favor of the bullet. I am a particular supporter of just making everyone face the fucking wall, and just and the last thing that they hear before the bullet enters their skull is the crack of the gun.
Like I say, that happens for shepherds, but if you do that for the sheep, you'll lose half your population in a day. If you could get that many people shot without getting yourself shot.
Right.
Yeah, like if you shot every person in Germany that helped the war effort, there would be no Germany left.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the problem. Like, because it basically ends up playing into the ways that people think about, let's say, like Palestine not having trans rights, and so they'll look at that element of, like, I mean, to be honest, with certain groups, a lot of right wing shit that does exist, they use Hamas as an example in that regards. But there are also some left wing groups that also have some bad ideas in this shit. Um,
Yeah.
and then like making a one-ton judgment, because then those ideas get replicated amongst the people. Um, the people will replicate the positions of their leaders, because capitalism itself kind of pervades this motion, but liberalism cares very little about sheep and shepherd. They just care about cultivating liberalism, while the fascists, they're an identitarian movement, and so they like to cultivate white supremacy and push it as far as they can.
Yeah.
That's why reform is necessary for certain people. There are people who deserve the chance to figure out that they were wrong. There are people who never deserve to see the light of day again. But
Yeah.
that still doesn't change the fact that I agree with Stalin's position that mass killings just lead to more mass killings. They're not a solution. They're part of the problem.
Logan Mansion Games was saying happy Juneteenth. Yes, happy Juneteenth to you. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that has been celebrated in England or not, but I know that in the U.S. that's like something that just recently became like a federal holiday. Um,
What,
I
you
think
guys
it
made a new
was like
Labor Day that's not on the right day again, just to be funny about it?
the funny part is that I'm actually like I was actually born right around Labor Day, so I am like in the U.S. So it's one of those things where it's like I my birthday typically always falls on like a holiday weekend here. But yeah, I find it absolutely hilarious that yeah we have a Labor Day in September,
My
but
birth
we
month.
just but and then but then of course there's International Workers Day on May 1st, and it's but we just call it May Day here in the United States. So and we don't even really celebrate it. There's not really any like a federal holiday for May Day. It's usually the federal holiday is the first Monday in September. So
Yeah, and yeah, fucking yeah, September's my birthday month as well. I'm right at the end of it.
uh, yeah, my sister has a birthday right, right around mid September, and then it's funny because I think Jason his birthday falls like right around mine, so it's like we've got. It just makes you
Yeah,
realize
I think his
realize
is
how
the
many
8th.
I'm not quite sure. It's somewhere around the time of my birthday,
Because I'm
like
pretty
maybe.
sure it's before mine. Mine's the 25th.
Yeah. But holy crap! It's just I realize just how many September babies we must have in the Marxist community. Because yeah,
I mean, if anything, given it's one of the few times Americans get off, you'll probably have a lot of June babies because everyone will finally get the chance to actually have a fucking September and then maybe have some kids a little later on. But also, I mean, a September baby is likely a baby conceived around Christmas time. I mean, I literally am 3 months before Christmas, and then Christmas is 9, 10 months away from my birthday. Then
yeah. Yeah, all I can think about is that, considering I was born in early September, I'm just thinking that um my mom and my dad must have been like getting busy right around Thanksgiving time here in the US, which yeah.
it depends on how
Which
early or late you were born and how fast your development is, because it is only roughly 9 months. Like you could be
yeah,
born like half a month earlier and still be fully developed if you had a faster development. But then you could also be born at the 9 month mark and be underdeveloped if you had developmental problems in uteri.
yeah.
Or is it uteral that's it's pronounced? Oh, I think it's in uteri. Um, I don't know. Funny language. When you're being nursed inside the womb. There we go. I'll use the animalia language.
Yeah, but yeah, no, and that's another thing too, is that here in the US we have going back to our weird holidays and stuff like that, like we literally. So in February, we used to. I remember as a kid, we used to celebrate. Um, not celebrate. We just got two federal holidays off. for Abraham Lincoln's birthday and George Washington's birthday. And then I think it was somewhere around high school time, right around maybe even close to early 2010, that I think it started changing, and they decided, no, we're going to combine it all, into President's Day, and we're going to celebrate that instead. By giving people huge, discounts on furniture, clothes, this, that, whatever, and and hey, you get a day off of work, or at least some of you, and then you get a day off from school, and we all get to celebrate because America, fuck yeah.
America.
Just fucking hell. It's like, yeah, we've got just the number of just overly patriotic holidays, or at least that have been turned into overly patriotic holidays. President's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, freaking Labor Day has been turned into that. It's not even about the workers. It's literally about another reason for people to eat hot dogs and freaking, drink beer and yeah, although probably not Bud Light this year.
I mean, if you wanted to save your money on beer, you'd buy Corona. It's not the cheapest, but it's actually tastes better than a lot of mid-tier beers, whilst technically being in the low-tier price range. So it's by being as better than most mid-tiers, but being a low-tier price range instantly makes it top tier.
Yeah, no, funny thing is, I actually, my beer of choice is typically, just because it's cheap and I'm poor. I usually just buy like, yeah, Corona. If I'm feeling a little more adventurous, I'll usually, or just need a change in taste, I'll just drink Blue Moon, because you throw a slice of orange in there, it tastes pretty freaking good. Um, but yeah, no, just we have so many freaking holidays here that, oh, and then I have to remember. I think over there it's considered Armistice Day, but we call it Veterans Day here in the United States. So there's another big freaking, and again, we treat it like, just like we do any other holiday. It's like it's all about the military. It's all about, America. It's, because America is like, never lost a fucking war. And then I'm over here like, Vietnam.
Yeah, but Vietnam is a country America made up to start a war. It doesn't exist, okay? We cancelled that one. I'm surprised
Yeah,
they don't use that excuse. They might be able to convince half of America that it's true.
yeah. It's crazy. We have so many of these freaking days. And I guarantee you, at some point they're gonna find a way to. Well, they already kind of have started in a lot of ways, making Martin Luther King Day just another patriotic holiday in the United States, because of course America would, and it's just, yeah. Sometimes I really do just fucking hate it here.
Yeah, I mean it's all about um it's all about preserving imperialism behind the guise of these are great days for you all to enjoy yourselves and your freedoms. And it's like within what framework, to what extent. And so um you have this whole motion of you have this whole motion of things that go forward. Calling Memorial Day Veterans Day is just them being honest about what Memorial Day is about. And Memorial Day is about two things: fetishizing the Great Imperialist War and giving appeasement to any other war the imperialists go into. Because if you oppose the current wars, you oppose all of the other ones, and you're spitting on the wild history of veterans protecting our countries.
Yeah, it's funny because somebody also mentioned Thanksgiving is another one, and yeah, pretty much Thanksgiving has, become, it's always been a commercialized holiday here in the United States.
It's always been a
But
fucked
it's also,
holiday because Americans claiming that they're good friends with the natives that they massacred, Isn't a good
Oh
look.
yeah, no, there's complete historical revisionism in the holiday because they basically play it off like, oh, all the the pilgrims and the natives, of course, as it was probably put to me in school, it was probably called the
The
pilgrims and the
Indians.
Indians. Yeah, because that started to become a little bit more like people have started calling them Native Americans or natives the um in history classes nowadays, because or at least in a lot more progressive states. I remember that was something that started to be taught in school, I think right around the time I got out of high school or maybe started college. But basically, yeah, it was one of those things where yeah, it was just one of those things where the language kind of started changing because kind of there was a societal switch that started changing, that started saying, we need to, be more politically correct for once.
They
And
didn't
it
do
was
that
one of those
here.
things where, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
they still teach it as Indians when I was in high school. And we have
oh
no
shit.
reason to change it because no one's going to get offended about it over here for the natives because no one here seems to give a shit.
Yeah, that they also committed horrible crimes against some of the natives here. I
Oh,
mean, maybe not.
we did, but
Yeah,
we don't have to listen to them because we're all the way over here. And like most the natives that were brought over here as slaves, which was still happening under Elizabeth's rule, they actually found a dead native teenager that was from the house servants that they had gone into Canada to pick up. Because yeah,
mm,
they were doing shit like that. But most of them are dead, and those that aren't are still servants for monarchs and billionaires, and so there are native people that do exist outside of America, including in the UK, but they make up not even a 0.1% of the population. So like no one's around to get pissed because I mean most native people don't have the ability to leave America. They're impoverished, and those that do have the wealth to do it have no interest to do it because the ones who do are like in privileged positions, capitalists, petty bourgeois types, and they're a rarity.
yeah.
They are, as people like to use that as a hammer and fist against the native community. They make up like such a small percentage; it's ridiculous.
I kind of sometimes wonder too, and I think there's a lot of our American viewers probably would probably end up wondering, have probably wondered this, is that how exactly is it that they teach like the American War of Independence and like the War of 1812 uh in Britain, because those are were because I'm sure that there's a slight difference probably in
We
how
just avoid it.
American.
You'd think we teach about the
uh,
1812 one. They kind of touched upon it when we were doing the American West. But during the American West, they just tried to focus on all the horrible crimes America was committing when they taught me that.
yeah, I think that one right there where y'all just basically avoid the conflicts that you had with the Americans and stuff like that. I think a lot of us now in America will probably be just like, that is such a British thing.
I mean, it's like either we would gloat about how we burnt down the White House and avoid 1776, or we would just not talk about either. Or if we were smart, we would bring up the whole like asking America to end slavery and them being bitches about it. But like the
Yeah,
and then we took almost like 80 years to end like slavery, well, chattel slavery within the Commonwealth. So
yeah, 'cause it
and we
kind
didn't actually fully end it, we just ended it as an official policy. It was outlawed, but that didn't stop it from existing
yeah,
because they didn't
because
give a
it's
shit
like,
that much really. But it was about
yeah,
by
because
1850 was about the time that we had outlawed it from the whole Commonwealth realms. But what we
yeah, I think like
teach is we teach about the the actual genocide being committed against the Native Americans, and we teach about it during the sort of 1840s to the 1920s. Um, and what's it? that was the shit that knocked my racism to pieces. I didn't stop being a fascist at that point. Acid dealt with that, but it did knock my racism out of my ass because I really saw the actual fruits of it and what it causes for humanity.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't like the official like act of Congress outlawing or Congress, act of Parliament, wasn't that to outlaw slavery? Wasn't that made in like the 1830s? I think. Like, I think if you like the
1837.
policy. Jesus Christ. Yeah, and then it took America another like 30 years to outlaw it here technically, and we had to basically
36
fight a fucking
years.
war over it. Yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
no, it would be just under 30 years. It was 1863 or something like that. They ended slavery
Yeah,
proclamation
1863
declaration.
was the Emancipation Proclamation, and then the Civil War ended in 1865. Yeah, and of course, America would literally go to war with itself over the issue of slavery. Honestly, America might even end up going to war with itself again over similar issues. And it's just, yeah. Um, it's um, it's also funny. Logan Mansion Games said here in the U.S. our American Revolution, that's what we call it, or I call it the War of Independence, whatever. It's taught like it's a war of people fighting for their independence against a monarchy. Yeah, that wasn't completely what it was. In reality, it's what America has always been essentially based on, the issue of property and states' rights and stuff like that. And which America, which I find funny considering America gives absolutely two shits about that shit now. They claim that they are for states' rights, but in actuality, the bulk of America is starting to favor more centralization, more authoritarianism.
I,
So
I mean, like, there's a lot of myths that go into it. So one myth, um, is that America left British feudalism, as if Britain was still fully feudalist in the 1700s. They had feudal elements. They still have feudal elements to this day. We live under a monarchy. But, like,
yeah,
Britain was the leading developing country in regards to moving to capitalism. Like, Britain had moved to, like, not fully, but had started the developments of its capitalist economy in the 1500s, and it slowly built its development. It was the first country to have a liberal revolution. The bourgeoisie were the ones whom supported the monarchy coming back into power. What the Americans were really doing is they wanted bourgeois development without a monarchy being involved. And that was only half true. Some of
right.
them wanted it, some of them didn't. There was a whole squabble between it. The second one is that, like, America itself was going for the capitalist road, and Britain was in this feudalist situation, and so, like, America was not feudalist, but like countries like Russia is. America was an agrarian society. I mean, they were moving towards capitalism, but America was full of peasants. Like, I have an American saying me that they never had a period of time where they had like peasantry when they'd left the UK, and it's like, no, you literally robbed peasants from here when we were moving towards industrialized capitalism in the 1800s, 1700s. Like, the Industrial Revolution had literally already started in the mid 1700s, and they're telling me about
Yeah,
how, like, they're escaping from the agrarianness of British feudalism. At best, we were semi-feudal, and not really. We were capitalist, and so, like,
yeah,
the Peasants' War already started in the early 1700s in the UK. It's 100 years of war. It was a domestic civil conflict where the British were running peasants off their land. That's why the Americans started opening their doors to loads of peasants, because this was happening in France. This was happening all over the place. We were just the quickest to get there first. The French started doing it in the 1800s. The Germans started doing it towards the end of the 1800s. And so America
yeah,
was open doors to it and give them small little plots of land. A plot of land for you, a plot of land for you. So they allowed a semi-feudal economy. It was still also part capitalist, but America was in this dual structure. Thirdly, is that, like, America did this for any form of liberal rights. Even the British tried to goad them on this. The British were like, let us have the only thing that be in competition between us, us competing to be the most liberal country. That's what they said in the letter they sent to America. They sent a letter going, "You should end slavery and like stay with us or leave. Go whichever way you want, but like end slavery and leave the only competition between our two countries being that of which one is the most liberal." And America basically screwed it up and told the British to fuck off. So like it was never about being liberal. The British tried to even goad that, and they told them to fuck off. And so what it was about was two things: Native American genocide and African slavery and genocide of African culture. The British wanted an end of slavery because of its bad publicity, and I will correct Summer. The British ended slavery for the Commonwealth in 1837. They ended slavery back in Britain in the late 1700s. I think it was around 1790s, 1780s, because it became very unpopular in the country. People in the country didn't want it, but because they could still do it in the colonies, they still did it in the colonies. They just
Yeah.
couldn't do it in America because America was the biggest, whitest colony, and so it was very visible. And so if they were going to ban it at home, they had to ban it in America. Um, and so but yeah, slavery, and then you also have Native American genocide. The British determined that there was no point expanding, there was no point fighting the natives, there was nothing to be gained from it. Just focus on the land they've got. Because as far as the British were concerned, the plains are a desert, which they technically
Yeah.
are. There's not much to be gained from them unless you march your way to death. And the way the Americans dealt with this, manifest destiny. All you
Yeah.
peasants and serfs, you go march west, and we'll catch you up when you've all died fucking pushing yourselves to the limit, building mud houses in the middle of nowhere, trying to survive by massacring anything and everything you can, as well as like capitalizing and forming businesses based on fur coat salesmen. A lot of the fur coat industry and the in general selling of pieces of buffalo and other stuff like that started with the peasants that would go out into the plains, and then they would hunt to make their money off of these goods. And when they figured out they could make so much money, they became mercantilists. The peasants
Yeah.
are very short off from being petty bourgeois, and so it took that evolution in the economic market for them to take up that bourgeois position. But this was already happening with the bourgeois in the British territories before the British lost them to the Americans, with beaver hunting. Beaver hunting was a massive thing
Yeah.
from pretty much the get go with America. To the point, I'm surprised beavers haven't been wiped off the face of America. Um, it's still a really common thing. Beavers are one of the largest targets for hunters when they can get away with it.
Oh, oh yeah. I've actually been kind of reading up and kind of watching some stuff on basically like some of the beaver wars and stuff like that, that that they called the beaver wars, but basically they were like territorial disputes and stuff like that between the US and Britain, in the Oregon country or Washington country, whatever it was called at the time. And basically, pretty much because we were had been expanding west, and we had a dispute over what would later become Oregon and Washington. And when finally that happened, we continued to try to push our luck, because essentially there was some island in the middle of the Salish Sea that was that right around like Vancouver Island area. And basically the Americans were wanting it, but the British, I believe, technically claimed it. And so there was this back and forth, basically kind of like this pissing contest. And pretty much the British and Americans set up like camps like within yards of each other. And had it pretty much been for one dude who wanted to basically start a freaking war, if he had had his way, we probably would have had yet a third Anglo-American war, because yeah, and it would have literally been over stupid islands and beavers. because America and Britain just cannot get along over their territorial disputes.
Oh, I mean, the American government was actually absolutely terrified of the British in this situation and was
Oh yeah,
willing. They actually were devising a plan to give Britain all of Oregon, but then Britain instead offered them a plan to split things down the parallel. I think it was the 38th parallel. I'm like,
maybe they should have just done that because then I would technically be living in Canada.
technically, you
uh,
wouldn't have been able to move where you're at now if it was for that, though, because you'd have had to have gotten a green card. And I mean,
yeah,
Canadians don't
that's fair.
Canadians don't want
Well,
Yankistanis.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? But yeah, no. At one point, yeah. I think that I think at this point, looking back, maybe that's what the British should have just kept. Oregon and Washington. I mean,
It might have
right?
prevented as much massacre that went on in those regions. It would have still led to massacre. The British weren't much better, but the British had more of an
That's
interest to use people than to just wipe them completely out than the Americans. Only slightly. Only slightly. I could
yeah,
literally talk about India for 5 minutes and already disprove that, but like the British committed a lot of genocide, but the Americans were much more bloodthirsty about it. A lot of black comrades will talk about this with the way settler colonialism works. Like, you know, with the white Americans, they take up a
yeah,
hold of a scarier formalization of the bloodthirstiness of imperialism, of colonialism, because they're directly on that front lines, and they are dobbed into believing this very specific white ethno state fantasy that they were guaranteed to them and never and that the British kept getting in the way of, because the British were more interested in their bottom line. They couldn't give a shit whether like people in the colony might be or might not be brown. I mean, they did at one point because they literally come up with this type of colonial culture. But then when it didn't suit them and it was better to just suit their bottom line to use different people as slaves and not wipe out a certain group and instead ram them into some form of slavery, which is just as bad as wiping a group out in certain aspects. But like
yeah,
the Americans then lashed out about it because that's getting in the way of their dream. Oh, you want to allow
yeah,
slaves to exist as people without
yeah,
doing a Lincoln
yeah.
and wanting to ship them out? I mean, if Lincoln
Yeah,
didn't die when he died, the black people would have been shipped to Africa.
yeah.
And
Well, Lincoln was also the type of person that very specifically also stated that if he could have avoided, uh, abolishing slavery in order to save America, he still would have done it. Like he basically, there was like some quote where it's like, if I could save America by, abolishing slavery, I would do it. If I could do it without ending slavery, I would do it. If I could do it by freeing some slaves, you know, but not all of them, I would do it. Like Lincoln, like Americans want to put this polish on Lincoln, like he was this all enlightened figure, that this godlike figure pretty much, that was that freed the slaves, and we were all hunky dory after that. Like,
what
no, the
allowed
man.
for it was the Republicans basically taking advantage of how racist Democrats were, the Dixiecrats.
Yeah,
It got the Republicans a lot of black support until about the 1950s.
yeah, and that's the thing that's just kind of that's just but this is a common theme with America in general with our education. I mean, Logan, it was saying in the comments that the U.S. Civil War is basically taught, like it's being taught, but they barely talk about like things like Secret Six and John Brown and his kids, who were fighting against slavery. Even if the CSA won, slavery would have gone away eventually. They would have just kept it around longer, but not forever. See, that part is that, yeah, they would have kept it around longer, but they would have basically, it would have just devolved into, well, pretty much what it is now. That the whole gentrification and the whole, like, giving people, impoverished wages, and, still, and treating, the people of color with like absolute contempt, then yeah, that they it would have just gone down a very similar route. It just, society probably would have just been delayed a little bit. And yeah, they don't talk about a lot of different things about the US Civil War. I mean, again, like I said, they make Lincoln, look almost like this, all enlightened godlike figure. And, we're supposed to, celebrate, him and Washington, every freaking February on President's Day, because these were like, this was like the founding father and the man that fought against slavery. Like, no, one was a colonizer, and a fucking slave owner himself, and the other was a guy, that, was kind of indifferent to the idea of slavery. And it was just one of those things where it's just like, why do we need to celebrate these two fucking white dudes? Why can't we celebrate, why can't we honor the millions of natives that were fucking killed? Why can't we honor, people like, Harvey Milk, who, fought for, for gay rights, as one of the first gay men to hold public office in the United States.
I mean,
Which, that funny enough, that was actually one of the questions. It's like I was actually being asked in the comments. It was saying, "Do you know about Malcolm X Day or Harvey Milk Day?" Malcolm X, both I know about, but the only thing is that Malcolm X Day is not really celebrated anywhere that I know of. Harvey Milk Day is largely more of a local celebration in a lot more of the gay communities, particularly in San Francisco. It was, and I knew about Harvey Milk Day because it was kind of like an unofficial like holiday here in the Bay, or back home in the Bay Area, and then it was and kind of was sort of became a public holiday in the state of California recently, because Gavin Newsom, the current governor, who is the former mayor of San Francisco, he's pushed to try to have more all-inclusive, sort of holidays like that, as kind of, again, a gentle, like one of those typical neoliberal, like, fake allyship sort of things. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, with I mean, it's like with Pride. Pride in America, if I remember rightly, was started by a black trans woman, but you won't hear people talk about that. But
Yeah.
it's like the same with the Brits. The Brits, they will all fucking do their shit where they'll show support for people like Churchill, an obvious fascist. No, like people are starting to see otherwise, but normally the people who see otherwise are anti-unionists, people who don't identify with that shitty
I
identity. Like I'm
yeah,
fucking
I would
part Irish,
almost
part Scottish, and part English. You will not see me call myself British. Fuck that shit. And you certainly won't see me celebrate Churchill as some war hero. Everybody
yeah,
save the war.
it's
But
funny,
the
like,
it's the
I,
same with like Charles II. He's very fetishized for his
oh
restoration of the
God.
monarchy and the invention of Britain, which was his idea. Um, and late 1600s, the idea was conjured, and
Even though literally,
1722 was when Britain came to be, if I remember rightly.
which I find funny with the Charles II thing, that he invented Britain, even though literally the Isle of Britain has existed for thousands of
You mean
fucking
the
years.
Bretonic Isles? It's technically a slightly different
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
Yeah, because the
but it's one of those things.
Britons is slightly different to Britain. It's a slight differentiation because of the Anglification.
Language, yeah. It's just,
It's a
but
complicated mess because basically, like a lot of the different Breton groups would have different words to describe Breton, Britain, Bretagne, Breton, whatever you want to call
yeah,
it.
yeah, and God, like Churchill is basically kind of like the like seen as kind of like I guess I would compare him to kind of like how Reagan is in the United States, with maybe a little bit of that war hero-ness that maybe we got from Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah.
That's like there's yeah, that's basically like what Churchill is in Britain,
I'd
and
say
it's
he's
just
more like Nixon, where there's like some people really like him, some people really hate him. Like
yeah,
take the popularity of Reagan and then the controversial nature of Nixon and the war hero nature of Roosevelt.
yeah, that yeah,
Because
that
Churchill is a controversial figure. I mean, he lost power because he didn't support universal health care after the war and wasn't very supportive of social programs, and so like he majorly
yeah,
lost. But then in 1950, I think it was 1950, he was re-elected again, and when he was re-elected, he was a fucking maniac, an outright bloody
yeah,
thirsty maniac. Um, I mean, Operation Unthinkable. I literally need to say no more. Um, that was at the end of the war, 1945. He made what was it? It might have been when he was re-elected, actually. But either way, it was just after the war. He made a proposal to the Americans to nuke the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe multiple times. It was like somewhere in the ballpark of like fucking like 30 or 40 times he wanted them to nuke. He wanted to nuke all of basically the key cities and then send in an invasion. The US turned around and said no because we might
yeah,
lose. They didn't say no because it's a
yeah.
heinous war crime.
Yeah, it's bad when the Americans are telling a British Prime Minister that it's saying, yeah, this is a major war crime. Don't do it, bro. Like,
Oh, they didn't give a shit about the war crime part. They literally just thought the Soviets would still win.
yeah,
Because that's what I'm saying. They didn't say it because loads of war crimes. They only said it because the Soviets would likely win. That was their response. They responded saying, logistically speaking, the Soviet Union will probably win the war, and the chances of us flying planes that deep into the Soviet Union and nuking them isn't very likely. Anyone who knows
yeah,
Soviet AA will know, not likely at all. I mean, post war, they weren't the
yeah.
powerhouse for AA that they were into the 60s, but like, they had some pretty good shit when it comes to fucking World War II era AA still. Like, they've been dealing with the Luftwaffe for so long. Like,
Another thought that I was kind of just having too is how, yeah, Churchill kind of that mix mash of things, but meanwhile Margaret Thatcher is kind of looked at in kind of a divisive light, kind of in a way Nixon was, but in the sense that, she's absolutely hated by, a lot of, like, by a lot of people on the far left, a lot of liberals, a lot of, of the social fascists in the Labor Party, but she is absolutely, like, put up on a pedestal as like this, goddess like creature by the Conservative Party. So, like,
you telling me you don't want to get stomped on every time you see Margaret Thatcher? Oh wait, we're on about a different kind of goddess. But the
yeah,
but the PG nature of this stream has now disintegrated. But yeah, Margaret Thatcher is like the anti-feminist woman that took power is the big thing she's famous for. Whether people love that or hate that, and working class communities just tend to despise her until you start getting closer to the more British identifying places, the South.
yeah. I also like that one right there, that Winston Churchill praised both Hitler and Mussolini before the UK joined the Allied forces during World War II. Well, technically, a lot of them did,
Yeah, really
because
well.
I guarantee you that that FDR didn't even bat an eye to the idea of Hitler, and until basically, yeah, until he started, like, you know
He
marching
literally
his way through
complimented
Poland.
Mussolini. Like he literally pondered about making America a dictatorship and him their dictator, and turned around and said that Mussolini
Yeah,
was showing a a fine example for what America should be doing with its socioeconomic structure. Mussolini and Roosevelt have very similar economics, and Mussolini himself pointed this out.
Right. I also love that one too. At least Winston Churchill hated landlords. I think Mao hated landlords a lot more, though.
Yeah, like Winston Churchill's hating like not really. Like the guy was very supportive of capitalism. He may have had some
Yeah,
problems with some of the specifics of certain groups, but he himself was an avid suit wearing capitalist. Anyone who's an
yeah.
owner of private property is a landlord, not just rentiers. You own a
Uh,
vast amount of property. You are a lord over land. That's the simples of it. Also,
right.
Churchill might have been specifically referring to actual lords. You know, like the thing we have a whole house for because neo feudalism trademark.
Yeah.
Because those fuckers have a lot of power in government. As much as the Americans will be like, they're just symbolic. The British, look at them. They're
uh,
so cultured with their symbolic leaders and stuff. Fuck off. Cultured my ass.
Kenneth,
The British are about as
Ken-
cultured as a fucking fascist's left cheek. White, boring, and full of shit.
yeah. Kenethius is like, I see the fascists as the gold of Stargate. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, your audio quality just all of a sudden fell into potato world.
No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. We've gone spud potato stream now.
But yeah, but yeah, no, I definitely see the yeah, I can definitely see that the basically the fascist is the gold from Stargate. Yeah, I can see that. uh,
Um, yeah, I'll end up having to edit the name of this stream because it has turned into an autism general discussion